Welcome back to the deep dive. This is the place where we take those dense academic articles, the stacks of research notes, and we just transform them into crystal clear, immediately useful knowledge.
And we know why you're here. You want to get that deep understanding, but you want it fast. You don't have time to get bogged down in all the jargon.
Exactly.
Mm.
We do the heavy lifting, so you get those aha moments without the information overload. And today, we are tackling a big one.
We really are. We're going after what a lot of people think is the single hardest sentence to write in any academic or professional setting, and that is the definitive research thesis statement.
And this isn't just about, getting a good grade on a paper. This goes way beyond that.
Oh, absolutely. This is about mastering the art of synthesis. It's about learning how to structure a complex argument, which is a skill you will use your entire life.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately. Let's just jump right in. We've gone through notes from writing centers, PhD programs, professional researchers, and they all say the same thing. The thesis statement is the heart of a research paper.
It truly is. It's not just some sentence you tack on the end of your intro. It's the engine. It's what drives every single word you write after that.
So we need to be really clear about what it's supposed to do.
Right. And for our purposes today, you need to think of it as this single guiding sentence that has to do three things at once.
Okay, what are they?
First, it has to summarize your entire argument, the whole thing in a nutshell. Second, it has to directly answer your main research question. No ambiguity.
And the third?
The third is maybe the most important. It has to guide the entire structure of your paper. If your paper is a house, the thesis is the blueprint. It tells you where every wall, every room, every window goes.
So we're definitely not talking about just stating a topic. It's not, in this paper, I will discuss climate change.
Not at all. That's a declaration of intent, not a conclusion. A thesis is a focused, defensible argument that you've reached after doing the deep analysis.
And the stakes are high, right? Because a lot of people, I think they just write a placeholder and think, oh, I'll fix it later.
And that is a fatal mistake. This is the moment where your entire project either comes into sharp focus or just completely falls apart.
So let's talk about that. What actually happens if that one sentence, that foundation, is weak? What are the real-world consequences?
The consequences are immediate, and they're devastating for the paper. It just unravels.
So unravels how?
Well, the paper becomes totally unfocused. The argument starts to drift. You'll find yourself repeating points. The evidence you've collected seems kind of random and disconnected.
So it's hard for the reader to follow.
It's a nightmare for the reader, but honestly, it's even worse for the writer. It's like trying to build a skyscraper without a structural steel frame. Everything just sags, the whole thing is unstable, you waste hours rewriting, and you ultimately lose track of what you were even trying to argue in the first place.
That sounds exactly like the classic problem we saw in our sources.
Mm.
The scenario of the researcher who has done all the work but just gets stuck, our notes call her Noor.
Right, the Noor scenario.
So Noor has spent weeks in the library. She's got the data. She knows her research question is solid. It's, how does regular physical exercise affect stress levels in university students?
It's a great question. Specific, testable. But then she sits down to write that one crucial sentence, and she gets stalled out.
And she writes something really simple, like exercise is good for students.
Or maybe exercise reduces stress, which, is true. But it's not a research thesis.
That's a premise, right?
Yeah.
It's the starting point, not the conclusion.
Yeah.
It lacks all of that analytical punch.
And that right there is the key distinction you have to understand, especially if you're moving from, say, high school essays to serious university-level research. A research thesis demands so much more rigor.
How so?
It can't just be an observation. It has to be highly analytical. It has to be incredibly specific about the how and the why. And critically, it must be directly tied to the evidence you have already found. You're not just making a claim. You're arguing a finding that you can prove with your sources.
So if your research shows the specific ways exercise cuts down on stress, the thesis has to name those ways.
Precisely. The thesis has to reflect the depth and the complexity of the research that's holding it up.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is clear. We are going to get you past those simple, vague starting points. We're going to unpack the exact qualities of a killer thesis statement.
And most practically, we're going to give you a clear, repeatable formula to get you from that basic idea to a powerful argument that actually builds the paper for you.
Okay, let's unpack this and get started. We're starting at the very foundation. When an academic, a professor, a reviewer reads your thesis statement, what are they looking for? What are the essential traits that tell them your paper is solid?
Our sources call them the 5 pillars of strength. If your thesis has all 5 of these, you are in excellent shape. It's like a checklist for academic rigor.
Okay, let's go through them. What's pillar number 1?
First, and this is completely non-negotiable, it answers the research question directly. If your question asks how something works, your thesis can't just say that it works. It has to explain the mechanism. If you ask why an event happened, your thesis has to propose the most likely causes based on your evidence. It is the direct answer.
So there's no wiggle room. The question is the locks. The thesis is the key.
That's a perfect way to put it. Okay, pillar number 2. It is specific. It moves way beyond a general observation.
And this is where our researcher, Noor, got stuck. Exercise is good, is just too general.
Way too general. Specificity is what gives a thesis its power. We need to know what kind of exercise, for whom, and what are the specific measurable effects. Specificity is the difference between a common sense statement and a scholarly claim that you can actually test and prove.
It also seems like it forces you to narrow your focus. You can't prove that exercise is good in a 10-page paper, but you can prove a much more specific claim.
You're exactly right. Which leads us directly to the third pillar, which is essential for any kind of academic conversation. It is arguable.
Okay, arguable can be a tricky word. Does that just mean it's an opinion?
No, absolutely not. An arguable statement means that it's open to a reasonable discussion, and this is the important part, it requires proof. If your statement is just a fact that everyone already accepts, like the Earth is round, it's not a thesis, it's a premise. There's nothing to argue.
So if my topic is World War II, a thesis can't be World War II happened between 1939 and 1945.
Correct. But a thesis could be arguing that a specific economic policy was the single most significant factor leading to the outbreak of the war. See the difference?
I do. That's a claim. A claim that reasonable people could look at the same evidence and maybe disagree with or at least interpret differently.
Exactly. Your thesis is your interpretation, and the rest of your paper is you marshaling all the evidence to convince the reader that your interpretation is the most valid one.
But isn't there a risk there? If you make it too arguable, do you sound uncertain? Do you sound like you're not confident in your findings?
That is a fantastic question. And the answer is no, because of pillar number 4, it is supported by evidence.
Ah, okay. The practical check.
It's the ultimate reality check. You can't just invent a brilliant, arguable claim out of thin air. Your thesis has to be a claim that you can actually back up with the sources you found. This is why you usually write your thesis after you've done the bulk of your research and reading. You let the evidence guide you to your argument.
That makes so much sense. And what's the 5th and final pillar?
The 5th pillar brings us right back to structure. It gives a clear direction. It literally functions as a map for the rest of the paper.
A map.
Yes. A truly great thesis will, either explicitly or implicitly, list the main points or themes that you are going to cover in the body paragraphs. It's an outline in miniature. So before I even read page 2, I know what the main sections of your paper are going to be.
So those 5 things. Answers the question, is specific, is arguable, is supported by evidence, and provides a map.
That's the formula for a rock-solid foundation.
Okay, theory is great, but let's move to application. This is where it's all going to click. Let's see the difference between a vague thesis and a valuable one, side by side. We'll use an example from our notes on tech and childhood development.
Okay. The research question is, how does daily screen time affect children's sleep quality?
And the weak thesis, the kind of placeholder thesis that gets you nowhere, is simply screen time affects sleep.
It's true, but it's also completely useless as a guide. Now, compare that to a strong thesis, one that was written after reviewing the scientific literature.
Okay, let's hear it.
Daily screen exposure before bedtime reduces children's sleep quality by disrupting melatonin levels, delaying sleep onset, and increasing nighttime awakenings.
Whoa. Okay, that's a night and day difference. It's not just a statement. It feels like an entire argument. Let's break down exactly why that strong version works so well.
The first thing is the power of explaining the how. It doesn't just say it affects sleep, it gives us the biological mechanism by disrupting melatonin levels.
And just for anyone who needs a quick refresher, what exactly is melatonin and why is that detail so important here?
It's a great question because this is where that specificity really adds academic weight. Melatonin is a hormone your brain produces in response to darkness. It's often called the sleep hormone because it helps regulate your body's internal clock, your circadian rhythm.
And the blue light from screens messes with that.
It's a massive inhibitor. The research shows that the specific wavelength of blue light from phones, tablets, and computers is incredibly effective at tricking your brain into thinking it's still daytime, so it suppresses melatonin production.
So when the thesis mentions disrupting melatonin levels, it signals to the reader, I've done the science homework. This paper is grounded in physiology, not just observation.
Precisely. That's the first advantage. The second is that it points to specific measurable effects. It doesn't just say worse sleep. It says delaying sleep onset, meaning it takes longer to fall asleep, and increasing nighttime awakenings.
Those are two things you can actually quantify in a study. You can measure them with sleep logs or even brainwave monitors.
Exactly. They are distinct researchable outcomes. And that leads to the third and most powerful function of this thesis.
The map, the outline.
It is the perfect map. That one sentence gives the writer a mandatory three-part structure for the body of the paper. Section 1 must be about melatonin disruption and the evidence behind blue light.
Section 2 has to cover the data on delayed sleep onset.
And Section 3 must analyze the research on why kids are waking up more during the night. The writer knows exactly what to write, and the reader knows exactly what to expect. It forces organization right from the start.
You're right. If you can write a sentence with that much detail, you've basically solved the entire structural problem of the paper before you've even written the first paragraph.
It turns a daunting task into a manageable three-step process. That is the power of a strong thesis.
I want to stick with that idea of structure for a minute because it's just so important. This idea that the thesis is a map for both you and the reader.
It really is the key. It's what separates a writer who is in complete control of their material from one who is just kind of lost in a sea of facts and quotes. When you lay out the stages of your argument in that first sentence, you are projecting confidence and clarity.
So to really drive this home, let's look at another case study. This one deals with more complexity, more nuance, which is common in social sciences where things are rarely simple.
Right. The research question here is, how does remote work influence working mothers' work-life balance?
Okay, and I can already guess the weak thesis, something like, remote work has many effects on working mothers.
You got it. True, but totally unhelpful. It doesn't commit the writer to anything. It doesn't give the reader any clue what's coming.
But the strong thesis has to reflect the actual research, which is complicated. For some, it's a blessing. For others, it's a curse. So how do you capture that nuance in one sentence?
This is what it looks like. Remote work improves work-life balance for many working mothers by reducing commuting time, allowing flexible scheduling, and increasing family interaction. But it also creates challenges related to continuous childcare demands and mental fatigue.
Okay, now that is interesting because it doesn't take a simple absolute position. It's not just remote work is good or remote work is bad.
Exactly, and that's a huge takeaway for anyone listening. High-level research has to engage with complexity. A thesis that acknowledges nuance and contradiction is actually much stronger because it shows you've mastered the literature. It says, I see both sides of the coin.
And it uses that critical phrase. But it also creates challenges. That signals a more sophisticated argument is coming.
It does. And structurally, let's look at what it mandates. First, the writer is obligated to have 3 sections on the positive.
Right, one on commuting time saved, one on flexible schedules, and one on family interaction.
Then, that but also clause acts as a pivot. The paper must then transition to discussing the downsides. It's not optional. The thesis forces the writer to dedicate significant space to the challenges.
And those challenges were continuous childcare demands and mental fatigue. Let's dig into that last one. Mental fatigue. That's a term that can mean a lot of things. What does it mean in an academic context like this?
That's a great point. We're not just talking about feeling tired. The research points to very specific cognitive loads. Things like cognitive switching costs. That's the mental energy you burn by constantly shifting your focus from a professional email to a child's question and back again.
It's draining.
Incredibly draining. It also refers to the pressure of what researchers call continuous availability, the feeling that you have to be on for your job and your family 24/7, which leads to chronic stress. So the thesis is pointing to specific research-backed psychological phenomena.
Which again creates a very clear structural map. You have your 3 positive sections, then you pivot, and you have 2 negative sections. The paper basically outlines itself.
And the argument becomes so much richer and more credible because it's balanced. It reflects the messy reality of the topic.
Okay, so let's circle all of this back to Noor, our researcher who was stuck with exercise is good. She's now armed with these principles: specificity, arguable claims, and structural mapping. What does she do?
Well, the key is she stops trying to invent a thesis and instead goes back to her research notes. She starts looking for patterns. She asks herself, across all these studies I read, what are the 2 or 3 mechanisms that keep coming up over and over again?
So she's mining the evidence for her main points.
She's letting the data build the thesis for her. And she finds 3 consistent themes. The research constantly links exercise to stress reduction through 3 distinct pathways.
And those were improving mood, reducing the physical symptoms of anxiety, and boosting overall energy levels.
Exactly. Those are her 3 pillars, drawn directly from the evidence. So now she can finally synthesize them into her definitive thesis statement.
Which is, regular physical exercise reduces stress levels in university students by improving mood, decreasing anxiety symptoms, and boosting overall energy.
And there it is. Perfect. It is so clean, so clear. It's specific about the who, students, the what, regular exercise, the outcome, reduces stress, and most importantly, the how, those 3 mechanisms that will now become the 3 main sections of her paper.
She now has a clear path forward. One section on mood elevation, probably discussing endorphins. Another on anxiety reduction, maybe looking at cortisol levels.
And a third on the physiology of increased energy. It guarantees a comprehensive, balanced, and evidence-driven paper, all from one well-crafted sentence.
We've seen what a great thesis looks like. We know the qualities it needs to have. Now let's give everyone listening the actual toolkit. How do you generate this sentence without just staring at a blank page?
Right. This is about moving from theory to practice. The best way to do this is with a simple 3-part formula. It helps you make sure you have all the essential components before you even try to write the full sentence.
A formula, I like that. What is it?
It's this. Research topic plus specific focus plus main points, thesis statement.
Okay, let's put that formula to work. Let's use a brand new example, something everyone can relate to, like the impact of social media.
Perfect. So step 1, the research topic, it's just social media. Super broad.
Too broad for paper. So we need step 2, the specific focus. What aspect are we looking at? Let's say its impact on self-esteem, specifically among young adults.
Excellent. That narrowing is absolutely critical. Now we have a manageable scope. Now for the most important part, step 3, finding the main points. This is where you go back to your research. What does the literature say are the main reasons social media impacts self-esteem?
Okay, let's say after reading a dozen studies, 3 themes keep emerging. First, it encourages constant social comparison. Second, it promotes unrealistic beauty standards. And third, it creates this intense pressure for social validation through likes and comments.
Perfect. Those are your 3 evidence-based pillars. So now we just plug all those pieces into the formula.
So we have topic, social media, focus, lower self-esteem in young adults, main points, comparison, beauty standards, and validation.
Put it all together and what do you get?
Heavy use of social media lowers self-esteem among young adults by encouraging constant comparison, promoting unrealistic beauty standards, and creating pressure for social validation.
And there you have it, a powerful, specific, and structurally sound thesis statement. It's a roadmap. You know immediately that this paper will have 3 major sections, each dedicated to one of those points.
And you're now committed, as the writer, you have to discuss social comparison theory. You have to analyze the research on curated images and their effect. You have to explore the psychology of external validation.
It creates total accountability. And if you find that your research for, say, the social validation point is a little weak, what does that tell you?
It tells me I either need to find more research or I need to revise my thesis.
Exactly. And that brings us to what might be the most liberating insight of this whole process for anyone listening. The thesis is not set in stone. It's not a one-and-done deal.
Oh, that's huge. Because I think a lot of students feel this immense pressure to get it perfect right at the beginning.
And that's just not how it works, not even for professional researchers. The thesis is an iterative document. You will refine it, you will tweak it, you might even completely rewrite it as you get deeper into the writing process itself.
So as you're writing the paper, you might discover a new connection or realize one of your arguments isn't as strong as you thought.
Precisely. Writing is thinking. It's a process of discovery. You might start out thinking your argument is X, but as you synthesize all your sources, you realize the truth is actually more like X, but with the important exception of Y.
So you don't throw out the paper. You just go back and adjust the thesis to reflect your new, more nuanced understanding.
You turn that new discovery into a strength. Your thesis should be the last thing you finalize, even though it's one of the first things your reader will see. It has to be an honest conclusion drawn from your completed work, not just a plan you made at the beginning.
Okay, last thing in the toolkit. Let's talk about language and tone. What are the specific words or phrases that can weaken an otherwise strong thesis.
This is all about maintaining an academic, evidence-based tone. The biggest mistake is using first-person declarations. Phrases like, I believe, or in my opinion,
Why is that so bad?
because it shifts the focus from the evidence to you. Your opinion doesn't matter in a research paper. What matters is what the evidence demonstrates. The argument needs to stand on its own, based on the data you present.
It's what the research proves, not what you feel. That makes perfect sense.
Another huge pitfall is using absolute language. Words like everyone, always, never proves.
Why are those so dangerous?
Because they're almost impossible to support. Academically, you're making a claim to universal truth, and all it takes is one single counterexample to completely invalidate your entire thesis.
It destroys your credibility.
Instantly. Good research deals in probabilities and strong correlations and tendencies, so you use more careful, qualified language. Words like frequently suggests a significant factor.
So instead of saying, exercise always cures stress, our researcher Noor correctly says it reduces stress levels. It's a strong claim, but it's not an absolute one.
Exactly. That kind of precise, rigorous language shows you're a critical thinker, and it makes your argument far more defensible. So we have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. Let's just take a moment to recap the practical, concrete skills you've gained, skills you can apply to your very next project.
Okay. First, you now know how to take a simple research question and transform it into a focused, analytical argument. You do that by demanding specificity and by explaining the how.
Second, and this is so critical, you've learned to mine your own research notes first. You let the evidence tell you what your main points are, instead of trying to force your ideas onto the data.
Third, and this is the big one for efficiency, you now know how to write a thesis that literally builds the paper's outline for you. That one sentence becomes your map for the entire writing process.
And finally, you understand that the thesis is a living document. It can and should evolve as your understanding deepens, which frees you from the pressure of getting it perfect on the first try.
The next logical step, of course, is taking that perfect thesis and using it to build a full outline and then, draft the complete paper. And that is where it gets really interesting.
But before we go, let's leave you with one final thought to chew on. We talked about how a strong thesis has to be arguable, so consider this.
What's the thought?
Does the ultimate strength of a thesis lie not just in how specific it is, but in how well it anticipates and maybe even preempts potential counterarguments? Does a truly great thesis force you, the writer, to constantly return to your strongest pieces of evidence?
What stands out to you? Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.